The film opens in a place called Sicily, where a criminal named Lorenzo arrives at his vineyard winery with his grandson and finds the bodies of his men lying everywhere. Lorenzo then goes inside alone and finds 3 men holding a retired U.S. Special Forces officer named Robert McCall with a gun to his head. Lorenzo then asked what he was doing there. Robert then replied that he was there for something they had taken that did not belong to them. Robert then gives them 9 seconds to retreat before he proceeds to kill the 3 thugs and then leaves the OMOD crawling away. He then grabbed a shotgun and blew Mr. Lorenzo's head off right then and there. As Robert walked away with a bag, his grandson saw him and told him to stay in the car, but the boy shot Robert in the leg and ran away. Robert then drove so far that he lost consciousness. He was then found by an officer named Gio Benucci, who took him to a local doctor in his town named Enzo Arizio. Robert then wakes up after a few days and finds out that he is in the city of Altamonte. Enzo told Robert that Gio had saved him. He also asks if Gio saved a good or bad person, but Robert doesn't know how to respond. When he tries to return home, Enzo intervenes, insisting that his wounds need time to heal and offering him a place to stay. Enzo took care of Robert, and after 3 days of treatment, Robert started to be able to walk with the help of a cane. One day, he went out to explore the city, hiding himself from the police around the streets. He eventually ended up at a local cafe where he met the owner and a waitress named Amina. She serves him their best coffee even though Gio only ordered tea. Shortly after, Gio comes to the cafe on his regular visit with his daughter, Gabby, and meets Robert. While Amina entertained her daughter, Gio handed over Robert's car keys and said that he had not checked his bag. Gio also said that he had parked Robert's car behind the station and could pick it up whenever he felt better.
Bye.
Ciao Roberto.
Gabby.
In the next scene, Robert makes an anonymous call to the CIA's Financial Operations Group and speaks to an agent named Emma Collins. He tells Emma about the wineries in Sicily and how they are linked to the drug trade, disguised as ordinary business transactions. After relaying this information, he puts the phone out of action. On the other hand, Emma relayed the information to another CIA agent. Robert spent the next few days traveling around the city and eventually got acquainted with the locals there. In the midst of that, he also learned about the Kamora, an Italian mafia gang, who harassed and threatened the townspeople for their earnings, demanding regular payments. One day, Robert saw a local seafood vendor named Angelo being beaten up by a high-ranking Kamora member named Marco Quant. Before leaving, he threatened Angelo that he would return next week to collect his money. After that, the gangsters head to a large building where the leader of the Kamora, who is also Marco's brother, Vincent Quaranta, tries to forcibly vacate the building. It turns out that the Kamora are working on their big plan: commercialize the city by building new hotels, resorts and casinos. In one room of the building, an old man in a wheelchair refuses to comply with the wishes of the Kamora gang. As a result, the gang members hang the old man from the window, leaving him to die. On the other hand, Robert and Enzo share a pleasant dinner conversation, and Robert insists on helping him with his daily chores. The next morning, he goes to the market on Enzo's behalf and visits Angelo's shop. The kind Angelo refuses to accept payment for his purchases, stating that it is his honor that Enzo's friend has come to his shop for the first time. Meanwhile, Emma and other CIA agents, acting on information from Robert, arrive at the winery to conduct an investigation. There, they find millions of dollars in cash along with bags full of illegal narcotics hidden in a warehouse. Surprised that this activity went unnoticed by them, Emma and her colleague, Frank Conroy, decided to look into the matter.
That money in there, is that connected?
No, that's something else.
On a rainy day, Enzo is examining Robert's wounds when Robert asks him why he treated him without involving an ambulance or the police. In response, Enzo reminds Robert of his first question he asked about being a good or bad person and how he had no answer for it. He claims that his silence is a sign of a good person. The next night, Robert grabs his rucksack and prepares to leave town, but he is stopped by the sound of bells. Just then, he saw the townspeople rushing towards Angelo's shop, and encouraged him to follow them. It turned out that Marco and his gang had set Angelo's shop on fire due to his inability to make payments. Despite this domination, the townspeople could do nothing but watch helplessly. Later, Robert, along with some of the townspeople, help Angelo to clean up the mess. Meanwhile, Gio reviews the video of the bombing and calls the Italian Central Police to investigate a van seen outside Angelo's shop. In the midst of all this, Robert gradually recovers, becomes part of the local community, and deepens his friendship with Amina. He also explored more of Altamonte's local cuisine, and eventually adapted to the city. On a routine day, Robert is seen enjoying his coffee at Amina's cafe when he notices Emma secretly trying to take his picture. Robert then reprimanded her, suggesting that Emma take the photo from a better angle. Emma asked why and how Robert could have such accurate information about the actual winery business. However, Robert kept giving vague answers, and also advised Emma to learn his remaining work. Later in the day, Gio goes to pick up his daughter from school. At that moment, he received a call from an unknown number, informing him that Gabby's school had gone home earlier than the other children. Worried, Gio asked one of the teachers, who revealed that an officer had picked Gabby up some time ago. In a state of panic, he rushed home only to find his wife and daughter held captive by the Kamora gang. Marco then beat him up in front of his family, chastising him for disrupting their operations. The gang threatened to take his family's lives if he interfered again. At night, Robert sees Gio leaving Enzo's office with blood on his face. Curious, he asked about the matter, and Enzo explained that such incidents were common in many cities because of the Kamora. According to Enzo, this problem is like a cancer that has no cure. The next day, Robert went to church and met with Emma once again. She confirmed that Lorenzo Vitali had been on Interpol's most wanted list for a decade and his operations were quite large. Curious as to why he chose her as an informant, Emma questions his intentions. However, she changed the subject by stating that she should focus on why Sicily was being targeted for this smuggling activity. Promising to find the answer soon, Emma says that she hopes to know the answer to her initial question at their next meeting. That evening, Gio and his family are having dinner at a restaurant when Marco and his friends interrupt their quality time. Marco asked Gio to help them build a boat for their personal business. Robert, who was also at the same restaurant, overheard their conversation and asked them to leave his family alone. In response, Marco threatened him to stay away from things that did not concern him. In a calm tone, Robert expressed his growing love for the city and its people. He then urges Marco to take his business elsewhere and warns him of the consequences if he does not comply. When Macro still ignored the warning, Robert twisted his shoulders and locked his hands, making him scream. He then ordered Marco to leave his gun on the table and exit the restaurant with his men. After a while, an angry Marco planned to re-enter with his men and kill Robert. But before they could proceed with their plan, Robert drove a van past two of his men and started fighting them. At one point, Marco pulled a knife and threatened to take his life. Ignoring him, Robert retaliated by twisting Marco's arm and thrusting the knife into his neck, ultimately killing him. The next morning, Frank calls Emma from Rome to inform her of the latest station bombing. It is revealed that the cash found earlier at the winery is also linked to a similar terrorist act. This led Emma to realize that the Kamora was directly funding terrorism by paying to smuggle drugs into Sicily. Furthermore, she speculates that Naples serves as a major transit point for drug transport and suspects the involvement of another team in Naples. Determined to unravel the entire chain, he began his investigation by interviewing key members of the Kamora. To that end, he also sought cooperation and access with the Naples police chief. Later, we see the same police chief attending Marco's funeral at Vincent's house. During that time, he tells Vincent about the involvement of the CIA officer, Emma, who is investigating their illicit trade. Vincent, who was mourning the death of his brother, became enraged by the statement and cut off the police chief's hand. He then threatened the police chief to focus on finding out the person behind Marco's death. Afterwards, Vincent sent the police chief to the hospital, with his severed hand preserved in an ice bucket. Elsewhere, Emma received a call, informing her of the police chief's plight. Shortly after, she also receives a call from Robert, who informs her about the Kamora's involvement in the drug cartel, which is closely related to the previous attack on the station. Robert's call inadvertently saves Emma's life, preventing her from falling victim to Vincent's planned bomb attack on her car. Afterwards, Emma is rushed to hospital for medical attention. There, she met Frank and told him about the Kamora. After learning everything, Frank assured her that he would handle the rest of the operation. That night, Vincent takes Gio and his family hostage, and threatens to shoot them in front of the whole town if his brother's killer doesn't show up. When Vincent does not receive any information, he shoots Gio in the ear and threatens to finish him off with the next shot. Just then, Robert reveals himself to Vincent and asks him to release the captives. He declared that he was ready to be taken away and tortured, but not in front of the townspeople. However, Vincent, as arrogant as his brother, refuses, insisting that the locals must witness the consequences against the Kamora. But before Vincent can kill him, the townspeople begin filming the ordeal, causing the gangsters to retreat. That same night, Robert infiltrates Vincent's home and secretly kills his bodyguards one by one. A sleeping Vincent is startled by a drop of blood on his forehead. The glass right above him suddenly shattered, but he managed to escape. Shortly after, Robert approaches him and forces him to take a lethal dose of his own medicine. Vincent tries to escape from his mansion, but Robert follows him. Eventually, the gangster collapsed on a cobblestone street in Naples and eventually passed away from a drug overdose. The next morning, Robert visits Emma in hospital, who expresses her gratitude for saving his life. He dropped a bag of cash on the floor and shared a story about a man called Greg Dyer, who had lost his pension in a cyber attack. This made her realize that Robert had followed the trail of the attack to the winery, killing Lorenzo and his henchmen, and taking the cash that Greg was entitled to. Intrigued, she asked if Robert and Dyer were friends, and Dyer explained that they had only met once. In the next scene, Emma traveled to Boston to hand over the lifetime income to Greg and his wife. Greg asked about the identity of the benefactor and wondered why someone would do such a thing for a stranger. However, Emma replied that she also wanted to know the reason. One day, at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, Frank gave a package to Emma that contained diaries and notes from Robert. To her great surprise, it was her mother's diary. When she connects the dots, she learns that Robert is none other than her parents' friend from the CIA. In the final scene, the people of Altamonte are seen celebrating their victory in a football match. Robert also joins the celebration as one of the locals. If you enjoyed this video, don't be shy, hit the like button, and if you disliked it, hit the dislike button twice just to be sure. You should watch the full movie. Thank you very much for watching.